Hi, welcome back. So today I'm going to be looking at Poly and how to implement hotspots on your 3D objects. So this sort of was sparked by a question by Chad David, who's following the channel, and basically he was asking how to implement it. He'd come across the procedure on Google support page, so I'll just click on and show you that. So here's the support page that basically talks about the 3D Swirl creative and then the different implementations you can do using the customizable templates that they have, and then specifically talking about hotspots. So when I saw this, this is great. I thought, right, this needs to be done as a video. Luckily enough, within about 24 hours, Chad had actually already resolved it himself. But I still felt I needed to complete that video myself and show you guys where I got to and what I've learned about implementing hotspots on Poly. I will obviously link this support page in the description below. Anyway, so it's actually all the way at the bottom, and it talks about hotspots. So once you've implemented your creative, you can then go edit the hotspots. Now, what they didn't necessarily explain, and reading through it's a bit not necessarily very clear, what you're supposed to do is use one of their templates as a way of implementing the hotspots correctly. By that, what's going on is that if you do it yourself, then the customization is not necessarily going to come through. But I'm going to go through that now so you can see what I'm getting at. And so you can see the steps and how you might do it. Now, first of all, to implement hotspots, you don't do it through the standard poly.com. You actually have to go to poly.google.com/pro and basically implement an account there. Still the same account, but it's just a sort of subset. And I assume this is where obviously brands would be establishing their creative that they want out in the world. So I'll just take you to the home page within that. So I'm just going to exit this. Let's go to My Polys. Right, so here it is. So it's very similar to normal Poly. You can upload an asset or you can create a project. For implementation of getting the hotspots to work, you need to do it as a project. So that's what I've done. I've created two projects so I can show you two ways of doing it. So first of all, I'm going to pop into this one called Red 5. Sorry, my internet connection is a bit slow. Right, so here's the object within my creative. So I'm just going to go and do some edits. So I'll show you how this works. In doing so, when I looked into the hotspot side of things, I actually learned about a few other things that you kind of need to do whenever you're building something and then putting it into Poly. So the orientation, the yaw, the pitch, how you control the 3D object is actually really significantly important, because if you just leave it sort of free will to control by the user, then it becomes kind of like, it looks a bit crap within the ad. So you do need to implement a couple of things within inside the Poly area. So we've already got the sort of the standard things, the materials, we've got the lighting control, but it's under experimental is where you need to make the implementations first before you get to doing hotspots. So there's field of view, which is really important. So this is like, you know, how much can you see around the object? So does it start very far back in the middle? Is it very far forward? It's kind of a balancing act there. Do you want to pivot around the object, or do you want to pivot with the camera? Then you've got camera rotation limits. So do you do pitch up and down, or do you do it on the yaw side to side? You can control the minimum and the maximum of that, so you can really sort of really experiment with that. I tended to leave it where it was because I quite liked it where it was. Oh, well, look at that. That's just not going to set back, is it? Okay, there you go. Right, set it back. And then you've got camera zoom. Now, if you set to unlimited, you're just going to go back on and on and on, and that's just going to look ridiculous, right? So it's important to establish what's your zoom depth, right? So best thing to do is find where you're happy with it, with your object, then come over to camera zoom limit, and then set limit camera distance, right? And that is it now. It's fixed to that, okay? So you can't zoom in and out. So that means you're presenting exactly like that. Then we're going to move on to hotspots, which is the next step. Now, with this, I've created two info cards, or two hotspots, sorry, with two info cards. So the first hotspot is this one at the front here, which is called twin laser cannons, and then we've got solar collectors here. And just to add a hotspot, it's really simple. You click add, then find a space on your object, tap it, and then you get given a new hotspot, and then you can click the info card here, plus, and then give it a name. Test, I'll just call this one, and that's it, you've done it. So I'm going to hit save on that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this 3D object to a project, and then we can see the results. So it does take a moment to save, so I'll let that do that. Right, that's now saved. I'm now going to go over to Google Web Designer. So within Google Web Designer, I have already started a project. I've done a little MPU, and I've added in the 3D model component. So that's under graphics and effects in the components library. I've not done the swirl, we'll come to swirl, but I just want to show you what happens when you implement your 3D model. I'm just going to refresh. So I'm going to select the component, I'm just going to refresh it. And hopefully, there we go. So it's now picked up my new hotspot. I'll then go and preview that. And there we go. So now I can do a rotation around it, and I can see my hotspots by clicking on them. Now, you can see the problem with them is that, well, they're out of alignment and I can't quite see the information inside them. So when I did this first time, I thought, well, great, I'll just jump into the code view as it explains within the system in the documentation, and we'll make that change. So I'm going to pop into the code view, and as it describes, you just basically do a search for hotspot. But typically, couldn't find it. And this was racking my brain. I didn't understand why it didn't work. And it turns out, if you implement an info card within PolyPro and you add information in, it's actually embedded into the object. So it's fixed to that object. So if you want to have editable data, what you must do is not add an info card. The best thing to do is just create a hotspot. So that's what I did. So the next step was I created a hotspot. I'll just go back over here to, in this case, Red 2. So Red 2, I've created some hotspots, but notice there's no info cards with them, right? So I took this object, went back into Google Web Designer, and I implemented it here inside a 3D swirl. So went to preview it, and yep, got the controls all working, everything's happy, and yep, I can't click on them, but none of the data's there. Well, that's okay, because I shall now just go into the code view and add the data as I want it. So back over to the code view. Right, so I'm in here, find hotspots 1, and there's nothing. There's nothing about adding hotspots or changing the data. And I was like, oh, what the hell's going on? So I jumped onto the support page, had a couple of chats, back and forth, reread the information on the support page again. So what it turns out is that what you actually have to do if you want to implement editable data, the best form or best approach for hotspots that are editable is to use one of their templates. So what I did was I basically went and looked for the Swirl Hotspot template. So that's basically, I went File, new from template, I went to Swirl for Display 360, and then on the left hand side, scroll down to, where is it? Sorry, here we go. Yeah, so I went down and I went down to this one, and it's called Swirl Hotspot. So I clicked it. I'll just show you the preview of it. Now, as you scroll down, it should load. Give it a moment. There you go. So it's a watch. It's got 4 hotspots. That's amazing. Wow. So this is brilliant. So what I then said, thought, right, well, I'll now just override this. So let's go and have a look at that. So here is the version of that template, and I've just updated it with a couple of things that I've obviously created, and I've added in my 3D object, and I've added in Red 2. So we'll go and hit preview, and there you go. So there's my object. I can still do the rotation, I can still do the up and down, and there we go. My hotspots are working. But I had to use one of their templates to get this to work. So it's somewhat frustrating that it doesn't bring across the data that you've created and then implement it inside Google Web Designer. You have to build it, you have to code it up. And I'll just show you what I mean by that. I'll just show you the code that goes with it. It's quite extensive. So it's no mean feat to just go ahead and do it yourself, I think. I mean, my hat is off to the guys at Google. I mean, this is a lot of stuff here you need to do. And if you had to do it yourself from the ground up, it would take a while. So anyway, enough rambling. Here are basically the handles to cover off the hotspots. Then you've got event listeners as well to control the hotspots and the rollovers. And then you've got coordinates control. So one thing to note is, I'll just show you quickly. I'll go back to design view. So when I first did this, because that's a quick preview, right? That doesn't, that's just showing the object as it is. So what I found was that if I just swapped out the object, so I'll just go into the component module, and I just put in my ID for my object. I just popped it in there, hit save, and I was done, right? And that's the same height. So I haven't changed the canvas height. So if I just quickly preview it again, just to keep the going, right? So look, it's set to the height of the entire banner, right? So it's the 300 by 600, a double MPU monster skyscraper, however you want to call it. However, what happens if I don't want it to be that big, that tall? It looks ridiculous, right? Okay, so I'll go back to the component itself, and I'll just change the height to 350, right? And then I'll change the position. So I'll lower it down. I want it a bit more in the center, okay? Hit save on that, hit preview. Do you see that? So my hotspots are where they are, but the corresponding hotspots with the data, the info cards, are now out of alignment. So that's really frustrating. So you'd have to, so if you wanted your field of view or your object to be slightly smaller, or if you wanted to lay it out slightly differently, you're going to have to realign the info cards. So that's really frustrating. So it might be a matter of redoing the field of view when implementing it to try and make it work, if that makes any sense. Maybe I'm not making much sense. However, if you want this to work, you basically have to match like for like almost. So whatever you're going to be implementing in, you need to follow what they've built as a guide. So you use that template, you build your object, and you follow the way that they've done theirs to match it up, so then it works. That will probably cut down any problems you might have or any issues you come across. I mean, of course, you could just spend the time going through the info card stuff and redoing it so it sits exactly where you want it to be. A few things just to quickly note. The icon for those things is actually on the stage, so it's something that's just moved into position to do that part, and then there's the info card holder as well. So that's it really. That's Poly and using hotspots. I have to say I'm actually quite excited by this. I think there's some great opportunity here for, especially from putting phones in. That's going to be really good. You get a bit more detail about phones, things you can call out about it. Products, so you could easily put in products, food products, cosmetic products, giving the user the ability to zoom in, look at more detail, have a hotspot that gives you data, nutritional data, allergy data. I think that's really good. That's another sort of shout out about that. But also hotspots. They're going to be great for when we have to implement this to augmented reality. So when we finally get to a position where our ads, our augmented reality implementation is possible. I'm sure it is kind of possible at the moment. I haven't tried it myself. I bet there is a way of easily doing it, but I haven't done it yet. But I will do it, and it will happen. However, my point being is that if hotspots are available now at this point with the pro level, then you should be able to basically put a phone or a product on a table and have a look at them using the hotspots that you've implemented in Poly Pro. So that's it. thanks for stopping by, guys. If you do want to follow me, that'd be very much appreciated. I'm not very good at these sign-offs yet. I'm still learning. First time YouTuber, I'm getting there, building up to it. But yeah, I would appreciate if you do subscribe. And if you'd like to look at any of my other 5-minute guides, that'd be great too. All right, guys, I'll catch you later. Thanks for your time.